Hello, everyone. Eric Renier here, and welcome to the 114th episode of the Writ Podcast. There's a lot going on in Ontario politics. We have a by-election coming up in Kitchener Centre in just a few days. And of course, the Ontario Liberal leadership voting is starting this weekend, and the results are going to be known on December 2nd. So to join me to chat about all of this, I'm joined by Sabrina and Nanji of Queen's Park Observer and Jessica Smith-Cross, Editor-in-Chief at the Trillium. Thanks, both of you, for joining me.
Thanks, Eric.
Happy to be here.
Like I mentioned, the voting is taking place this weekend, though we're actually only going to know the result a week later. But since the voting's taking place, probably while a lot of people will be listening to this, we should probably get to that first. Jessica, why don't you kick us off? I'm curious, before we talk about what to expect on December 2nd, what has kind of struck you about this leadership race as a whole? What did we learn about the Ontario Liberals over the last few months?
It's been hard fought. I think there's a lot of confidence in the party that they might be rebuilding this time. They might have their shot, and that the person who's the leader now, it might actually get to be the premier. You see the candidates all talking about that, and the amount of effort and time and even emotion that's been set into the race suggests they think there's something really big on the line.
Sabrina, what struck you about this race over the last little while?
Yeah, I'm with Jessica, and the three of us were kind of casually talking before about how cutthroat this race has been, and that was kind of surprising for a third place unrecognized party, right? It's maybe not something you would expect, but I think certainly the Liberals are feeling good. They're feeling galvanized. They're clawing their way back to relevancy. Leadership races are good for media coverage, especially one that's hotly contested like this one. They are raising big bucks for party coffers, which are obviously important if you want to be competitive in any election. And they're feeling, good after two by-election wins. I know we're going to talk about Kitchener Centre, the one coming up soon too. And they're feeling like this is the comeback after, getting decimated in 2018 and, not really making much of a difference in 2022. I also think the Conservatives are feeling that as well. We can kind of see them taking aim more so at the Liberals than the actual official opposition NDP. So it kind of feels like anybody's game now because of the style of the leadership race being one member, one vote. I think a lot of us that are covering it are excited to see that come to pass and talk to the new leader and what's next for the party.
I hope the party will put out some detailed information, because with these the members each get a vote, but it's all weighted by riding, and then there's the student groups and the women's groups as well. I'm very curious to see how that's all actually going to break out. One of the things from the 2018 PC leadership race that was just bizarre is that Doug Ford won with fewer votes and fewer ridings, and it was just the system that kind of made him the leader of the party. So we'll see if anything like that's going to happen for the Ontario Liberals. Jessica, the party must be very happy to be having 100,000 members, which is a lot for any party. They get a cut of all the fundraising that all the candidates are bringing in. Seems like this race has been, despite the divisions, it's probably pretty good for the bottom line of the party.
Yeah, and you hear that from the candidates. They like to talk about how no one was interested enough in the NDP leadership to contest it. Right? It was Mart Stiles was acclaimed, so the Liberals like to talk about how this has energized the party and how so many people want the race, and they have raised a lot of money. The perceived front-runner, Bonnie Crombie, has raised over $1 million, and the other candidates are well behind that, but for the Liberals who've struggled with fundraising, this has been a big boost, you're right.
The divisions, though, Sabrina, do you think these are going to be felt after, win or lose, whoever it is? Will the party remain all that? Will there still be 100,000 active members in the party after the race is over?
I think that, at the end of the day, they're all Liberals, right? They're all on the same side.
They don't seem to agree, though. I'm not sure.
Well, it's interesting, right? Because I do think that this has been fascinating to see, even on the policy side. You've got someone like Bonnie Crombie who has gotten in trouble, at the get-go. She had sort of put her foot in her mouth, talking about being open to opening up the Greenbelt in certain situations. She had said that, she wanted to govern from the center right. She's since walked back those statements, but we've sort of seen her opponents go the complete opposite direction. Erskine-Smith is, pushing maybe the more left-leaning side. So it's been interesting, I think, on the policy front too. But I did ask a couple of my Liberal friends, like, how do you guys get back to normal and, being united under this new leader, whoever it's going to be? And they said that they're all just going to do a reset and they're all going to be, kumbaya after this. But I do think that for a lot of people, it's been very cutthroat. But at the end of the day, that's just politics, and I think it's well understood between the camps. And again, I think it just makes for better policy discussions because they're all liberals at the end of the day, and I think they'll be able to get it together and put up a united front to Doug Ford, which is the ultimate goal.
Jessica, what do you think of that and the future unity of the Liberal Party?
The two of the candidates, I think, are edging close to saying things that you can't take back, things that the Conservatives are at some point going to use against the leader, if the leader is Bonnie Crombie. So she's the front runner. Nate Erskine-Smith and Yasir Naqvi have had some strong things to say about her. They've taken a sort of a criticism of her ethics or of perceptions of her ethics, and they're trying to split that fine line there concerning the donations she's accepted from developers, including a group of donations that came from people associated with a single development company that had business before Mississauga City Council, first reported by the Trillium. I'm just going to add, but the way they've used that in leadership debates has been to say she has this vulnerability because she's done this. The PCs will use that against her. Whether that was true or not, now they do have clips of these people saying that kind of thing in debates to use against her if she wins.
Sabrina, I mean, Nate Erskine-Smith and Yasir Naqvi are both MPs. They're not going to be part of an Ontario Liberal caucus that is led by Bonnie Crombie if she wins. So I guess that might leave them some options. But what are we expecting those two, if they don't end up winning? Are we expecting that they're going to resign their seats? I'm curious because they didn't resign them, right? It's often the case that when you run for leadership at a different level, sometimes you usually step aside. If you're at a different office, you could say the same for Bonnie Crombie, who's the mayor of Mississauga. But what's the future of those two if they don't win? Do they have a future within the Ontario Liberal Party?
Yeah, I mean, I think Bonnie's trying to play diplomat here and says, yes, everyone's sort of welcome under her leadership. The other two have not been so clear. I think especially Nate Erskine-Smith, right? Like he said that he's wanted to talk it over with his family, which is like a very honest answer. But you're right. It is kind of hard to imagine that they could all be together in a cabinet even. At this point, we know Adil Shamji, who had backed out of the race, didn't quite, make the cut for the fundraising and entry, the threshold to get into the race, $100,000, entry fee. So he backed out and decided to throw his support behind Bonnie Crombie. There's a lot of speculation that, maybe he's going to be a health minister. He's already a health critic and an emergency room doctor. But I think for the other two, yeah, I think it's a big question of, will they still actually run for MPP with Bonnie Crombie? I mean, she doesn't even have a seat herself at this point. So there is, buzz that she might potentially run in Mississauga. There's a seat that could potentially open up if Khalid Rashid, tied up in the Greenbelt debacle, might resign his seat if he wants to stick around until 2026 as an independent. That would leave an opening for Bonnie Crombie. So I do think, yeah, to Jessica's point, it kind of makes, post leadership a bit awkward between everybody.
I'll jump in.
Yeah, Jessica, go ahead.
We actually, Bonnie Crombie told one of our reporters on Wednesday that if that Mississauga seat opens up, she will run there. And Yasir Naqvi has committed to running as an MPP again. Yeah, you'll remember he was a former Attorney General for the province. He's committed to coming back. The situation is more complicated for Nate Erskine-Smith. His federal seat is held by one of the few sitting Liberals at Queen's Park today, Mary Margaret McMahon, who Erskine-Smith is close with and helped get elected in the first place. So what he has said is the issue is that he doesn't know where he would run. And he's also said that if it is Bonnie Crombie who wins, he's not sure what kind of role he might play in that government role, what she might have for him. So yeah, he's the big question mark there.
If I was looking at the polls, both federally and Ontario, I'm not sure who has the better shot of being reelected right now. I mean, obviously, Toronto and Ottawa, not the worst places for even federal Liberals, but even so, the riding Ottawa Centre I'm in now, and which is Yasir Naqvi's riding, was NDP not so long ago, right? So, all right, we're getting ahead of ourselves. There's still going to be a vote taking place this weekend. Jessica, what are you going to be watching? What's going to be the decisive factor, you think, over the next couple days? Because this is in-person voting for the most part on the 25th and 26th. It's not like not an old-fashioned, but the other races we've seen, you just mail a ballot. You got to show up.
Yeah, so that means turnout is a huge X factor here. It's a lot easier to join a party where it's free and you can just become a member than it is to actually go and cast a ballot. So who can get the votes out to support them is probably going to decide the thing. As part of it, we haven't talked about this yet, but Yasir Naqvi and Nate Erskine-Smith have this pact. They came out in front of everybody and they said, I'm going to win, but my number 2 in my own ballot is going to be the other guy. Which was, an interesting twist to the race. But as part of that agreement, they're also doing get out the vote in a coordinated way where they're splitting up that work between the two campaigns to sort of maximize their resources as they each have fewer resources than Bonnie Crombie does. So that pact should have an impact on that front, the get out the vote front. There are some few other X factors, this late in the game that maybe people are going to try some last-minute strategies. There's also been I've heard a couple of whispers about whether or not the conflict in the war in the Middle East will have any impact on who decides to turn out and who will support who. So again, Erskine-Smith and Yasir Naqvi have both called for a ceasefire. Bonnie Crombie has not, and there's been a little bit of tension with some people over that decision. So that may impact some people's votes this weekend.
Sabrina, for the the organizational side, people getting their people out to vote, is there a general view of who has the advantage here, who has got the better organization?
I mean, I think we can't really discount Bonnie Crombie's cash arsenal right now, and that gives you a lot of resources to do things like get out the vote effort. At Queen's Park Observer, I actually got this internal memo from Simon Tunstall, who's the chief returning officer. He's run leadership races for the party in the past. It's not his first rodeo, but he had sent out this memo saying that they're bracing for, just over half of turnout, around 56%. And I do think that might be, a bit on the low side, given how many people are eligible to vote. But like you said, it's in person. The party might not be printing like a ballot for every person. So I do think turnout is going to be something I'm looking toward. And for, Bonnie being the perceived front runner here, I don't think she can take anything for granted, because at the end of the day, it's, you need to get your people out to vote for you, because this is a ranked ballot. I do think that pact between Naqvi and Nate Erskine-Smith, obviously it's not going to capture every single one of their supporters, I should say, but that it will certainly, have an impact on them. So I think I'm curious to see, how many rounds of voting we're going to get on this. Can Bonnie actually do it in one shot and have a first ballot victory, as her camp is insisting is going to happen? They're feeling confident, I guess, but at this point, to me, it still feels like anybody's game.
When, because I watch a lot of leadership races across the country, when there is a candidate who's very much the front runner and is running as a front runner, not really having much of a second ballot kind of strategy, if they don't get high enough on that first ballot, it's very hard to roll up the support from other candidates, right? So if she ends up with 38, 39 on the first ballot, let's say, that would be really tough, I think, for her to find the extra points to get up there. But if she's at 42, 43, 44, there's just inevitably some bleed from some of the other candidates, or people just don't rank anybody third or whatever it is. And, she would maybe be able to get up there. But the kind of fundraising she has, fundraising is often a pretty good predictor. Seems plausible she could win on the first ballot. Jessica, what's the different paths here towards a Crombie win and a Crombie loss?
Yeah, if she comes in a little bit under 50 on the first ballot, the next best hope is that the fourth, who's perceived to be the fourth place candidate, and in fact may not end up being, is Ted Shute, who we spent very little time talking about. He's an MPP from Kingston. He's popular locally, but he doesn't seem to have had the strength of any of the other candidates during the leadership race so far. He was actually offered to be part of this pact with Yasir and Nate and turned it down. I think it's reasonable to suspect that quite a few of his supporters would mark Bonnie second. So the next hope is that if he is the first to drop off, those supporters might join her. Maybe that would put her over the top. That would be around a 2 win. And then, but if it's one of the other candidates, after that, things could go, I don't know, in many different directions. And that's what makes it exciting.
And if I understand correctly, they are actually physically counting the ballots rather than, like we saw with the Conservative leadership race where it's gone into a computer and they push a button, the result comes out. Except for the Ontario PCs, because that didn't work out very well on election leadership day, if we remember. So if it goes to several ballots, could end up being a pretty long day, even though all the votes will already be still there. Both of you, Sabrina first, how are the other parties seeing this race?
Yeah, I had said the Conservatives are definitely taking aim at Bonnie Crombie. They think she's the one to beat. We can already see, anytime she says something, they're kind of already ready with their attack, putting out clips from things she said. I do think that, especially developer donors, it's a bit hypocritical for them to maybe be going after her on that front. But they have said things like she's only in it for herself. They've sort of attacked her for taking off, she's on unpaid leave from her job as Mississauga mayor. They said, she's really being selfish in doing that. So certainly I think that the Conservatives are looking at Bonnie Crombie as the one to beat. She does have this knack for getting under the Premier's skin. They've gone toe to toe over development charges and the Conservative government scrapping that. We know Ford has made some unpopular decisions for municipalities, and Bonnie, especially as chair of the big city mayors, really fought him hard on that. And so I do think the Conservatives see Bonnie as the one to beat. The NDP has been fairly quiet, I think, on this. And I do think it's interesting that Marit Stiles, at the beginning she was, maybe not as she didn't come out, with a bang necessarily. But I do think that since September, since the House has come back now, and, with all we've seen on the Greenbelt front, she's really been, frankly, killing it in question period and holding the government to account. So I think she has settled into her groove. It, takes some time for new leaders. But also, the NDP and Liberals, they tend to share, ridings. So 2018 was a change election, and the NDP did take, poach a bunch of seats from the Liberals. And so I do think that there is going to be some drama between these two. Bonnie is especially popular in the GTA and the 905, and the NDP did manage to pick up a lot of those seats. So did the Conservatives, especially 2022 in Brampton. And so I do think that having someone like Bonnie Crombie, a GTA, popular GTA mayor, would be especially problematic for the NDP too.
For the Mississauga area, a lot of the seats that the Liberals did pretty well in that they didn't win were in Mississauga, right? So if Bonnie Crombie just gives them a small 5-10 point bounce in Mississauga right there, that alone could bump them up to 12 seats, and they can get their recognized party status. Jessica, what do you think? How are the other parties viewing this leadership race?
Yeah, Sabrina is absolutely right about this sort of antagonism between Bonnie Crombie and Ford, and that's where the focus has been. And it's interesting to see Bonnie's campaign use that as an advantage. She likes to say, I get under his skin. I'm the one that riles him, and this is what you want as in your leader. But of course, that will change if it turns out to be anyone else. You can imagine the lines of attacks that the PCs might use on any of the candidates. Nate Erskine-Smith has mused about raising taxes on wealthy people. I can imagine what the Premier might have to say about that. Yasir Naqvi was the Attorney General in Kathleen Wynne's government. You can imagine what the Premier is going to say about that. So
right-hand man, right?
Yeah. So we'll see.
That's Stephen Del Duca, who I think was the transportation minister at the time, was suddenly the right-hand man of Kathleen Wynne. So Attorney General probably a little bit more higher profile. Anyway, so anybody want to make a prediction?
No.
Definitely not.
All right. Well, then, how about an even easier thing to call, the Kitchener Centre by-election? So this came after Laura May Window resigned earlier this year. This is a seat that has been NDP for a few cycles now. It previously has voted for the Liberals. Federally, the Greens hold the seat, and it's the same boundaries, so that's an interesting dynamic, and the Greens seem to be putting a lot of effort into it. Jessica, why don't you give us the Coles notes of how this by-election seems to be setting up?
I mean, you did a great job right there, and it's another one that I definitely would not call, which is what makes it interesting. So some other factors here: the Conservatives have been second in the riding for a little while, but their candidate is somebody who doesn't live in the community, who's a party loyalist, who hasn't been extremely vocal during the campaign. So I'm not sure if that would instill local voters with a lot of confidence in them, but you never know. The Liberals are very excited about having come off of 2 by-election wins, one of which was like a historic first for the riding, so they're confident. I know they got a local endorsement from OACTA, so like traditional Liberal support, they're sort of coming back to the party. But yeah, I think it could go in a number of directions. Maybe this is the next big Green breakthrough. Mike Schreiner, who's the provincial leader of the Green Party, is like right nearby in Guelph, and they've been working hard. They really hope to have that support, considering the federal Green MP and Mike Schreiner's, nearby base of support. And he wins very well and very strongly, and is locally well liked.
And I was looking at the results because the federal Mike Morris was able to win, and it's true that the Liberal candidate withdrew from the federal race in that riding, and that's one of the reasons why he was able to win. But in the previous election, they still had pretty high support, so there is a base in Kitchener Centre of Green support that there is that opportunity for the Greens to make that breakthrough. So that is really something I'm really curious to see. Sabrina, what do you think about how this by-election is setting up?
Yeah, I think you guys have both covered all the big points here. I think the Greens are going to be the one to watch for me because, like you said, for all those reasons, it's still a big feat for them to grow their caucus of 1 at Queen's Park. But I do think, yeah, exactly. But I do think that this would be a very good chance for them. Obviously, Ashton Clancy, she's a counselor. She has name recognition. She was the first one to be nominated. So she's been pounding the pavement for months. They've told me that they're now making their second round and, they've knocked on 60,000 doors. They're going back again. The PCs, their candidate, as Jessica mentioned, lives in Keswick. And he was nominated just before the by-election call. So, I mean, turnout in by-elections tend to be much lower, especially because it's getting cold out. I don't know how many people are going to go out. How many people even want to open their door now and let the heat out to talk to you when you're going door knocking? But so I guess timing is everything. But I do think that at least the Conservatives that I'm talking to, they are shaking in their boots a little bit over the Liberals because, as you said, before Laura May Lindo took the seat for the NDP, it was Liberal since 2003, I think. And so I do think that they think that this could be a comeback for them. Someone had a cheeky take on all of this and said they're calling it 2 days before the Liberal leadership because they don't want to give whoever the new leader is that win, credit, they wouldn't be able to take credit for that. But I guess, yeah, I'm going to be looking at how the Greens can maybe raise their vote share. For the NDP, though, I think this is very high stakes for Marit Stiles in particular. I mean, obviously, she's going to want to hang on to that seat. There's been some internal drama, at the local level, with the Kitchener Centre Riding Association coming out swinging and calling for Marit Stiles' head after the Sarah Jama ouster and all that. And so I do wonder if that's going to have any impact on how people vote. Certainly, I think, it might have hurt them from an organizational point of view a little bit, but I don't know how closely, everyday voters are really paying attention to sort of that inside baseball stuff. So I do think that will be interesting. I think for sure for Marit Stiles, it's very high stakes because she's now lost someone in Hamilton Centre and Sarah Jama. Kitchener Centre seems to be up for grabs, certainly by the Liberals in particular. And so this would, not be good for someone who is a new-ish leader and, trying to keep her caucus united and in check.
It seems because this is more or less, it could be a four-way race, so you could end up with someone winning with 31% of the vote because of a split. So you can imagine that for the PCs, if they somehow just win this by default, it'll be a huge coup and a big sign that everybody is very happy with Doug Ford. If the Greens can win, a big breakthrough for them, lots to be happy about. For the Liberals, look, we're back. The NDP, it seems like they only have losing options here, because even if they end up winning by a little bit, it's unlikely they'll still be able to match what they had in the last election. So, Jessica, it feels like this it comes at a really sensitive time for the NDP.
Yeah. Laura May Lindo, the MPP who stepped down while voicing some dissatisfaction with the party. Her issue was that she couldn't afford like the childcare required to work in Toronto as an MPP and have kids at home. And she tried to find solutions with the party, but none of it would work, and she stepped down. So that was public and a little bit messy. And she's also criticized Styles over the Sarah Jama oust over her comments on the Israel-Hamas war. There's a lot of poking soft spots there for the NDP that isn't great. And at the same time, the provincial council, the party's provincial council meeting is this weekend, when we know that some of the people who are upset about what happened with Sarah Jama being kicked out of the party over her comments are going to raise those issues at the provincial council all at the same time they're trying to get this by-election across the finish line.
For Doug Ford, just to kind of take things back a little bit, it should have been at least a rough fall with the Green Belt scandal, but we haven't seen that in the polls. The polls that have been published over the last little while suggest that Doug Ford remains pretty Teflon on all this. Sabrina, it seems like the fall could have been a lot worse for Doug Ford if there wasn't these other things happening. There's a Liberal leadership race. There was the Sarah Jama kind of controversy and the internal fighting within the NDP. Doug Ford just seems to be very lucky with his opponents and how things have worked out for him. How has he managed to remain so Teflon through all this?
Yeah, that's a great question, but you're right. He seems to have this like armor, and it's really hard to take him down a peg. But I do think there's like big ifs around all of this because he's still got this RCMP investigation hanging over his head, and it might be some time before we find out, where that's going to go. But certainly we have seen in the polls that the backtracking they did on the Greenbelt was enough to keep him ahead. And I think that they, at least, from what I'm hearing from the Conservatives, that they are feeling like they're in the clear. But again, it's all very like tenacious at this point, just because we don't really know how the RCMP investigation is going to go. There's still more, reports coming. The Auditor General is looking into MZOs. And we've already sort of seen the Ford government kind of, preempt, maybe not what's coming, but they are doing a review of MZOs and already have given them like legal protection from any decision making on that. So I do think each party, though, in its own way, politically has gotten a gift to sort of attack each other. And we did see, the same day that the RCMP investigation was announced was sort of when the Sarah Jama drama like exploded, and everyone was writing about that. And we saw the Conservatives capitalize on it by passing this motion to censure Jama like in the House, and that really sucked out like all the air in the room. It got a ton of coverage. It changed the channel, and so I do think that each party has sort of been given a gift to attack each other these days. And for people who are paying attention, I mean, I do think that at the end of the day, if the Ford government can sort of do what they say they're going to do, which is also a big if, because 1.5 million homes over a decade isn't really even possible based on the number of housing starts we've had, that they could get out of this. I think that just where the housing crisis is, that people are willing to forgive the Ford government if they can turn it around. But if in 2026, if Marit Stiles or whoever is leading the Liberals is standing in an empty lot saying Doug Ford promised that there would be housing here and there's nothing, I do think that that's when the Conservatives will be in trouble.
Jessica, how would you assess how things have been for the PCs in this fall sitting?
I agree absolutely with the gift that Sarah Jama handed them, and they absolutely took it and ran with it or put bows on it. Choose your metaphor, whatever. But yeah, it helped them a lot, get people talking about something else. The RCMP investigation, there could be more to come, there could not be. It could fizzle out, in which case they're in the best possible position. I think that one of the things that matters to voters is who is in charge. So with the Liberal leadership race could make a big difference. We don't know yet if people are going to feel attached to or inspired by the leader to come. And I think that has the potential to change things. Maybe some of those Conservative supporters, people who are pressing the Conservative button on the phone poll, may end up saying that, no, now that I have someone to understand who I would support otherwise, I could move on from there, which might explain the attacks on Bonnie Crombie.
Well, it's going to be a pretty interesting couple of weeks. We'll finally get some answers for some of these things that I don't think either of you want to make a prediction for Kitchener Centre either. No? Okay. Yeah.
Pass.
That's what I thought. Yeah. Whatever does happen over the next little while is going to have some pretty big implications for the next couple of years, straight through to the next election. So appreciate both of you joining me today and kind of breaking it down for listeners.
Thank you.
Thanks.